So with the concentration, it entails a gateway course and then a bunch of courses that are either specifically for that concentration or usually they're cross-listed with other departments. And then the main part of a concentration is the two practical experiences. And so those really differ between concentration to concentration, but obviously with a museum's concentration, it would be working in a museum. So it's a pretty easy one to be able to figure out what you're going to do for your practical experiences. I'm an art history major, so that is where I thought would be a really good route for my art history degree and knowledge to go is to museums. And so anything that I guess really has that name on it was helpful to me. And then as I got deeper into seeing what a concentration was, I was like, oh wow, this is going to be like really helpful and like kickstarting a career right away too. So I began looking at internships, and I worked at the Toledo Museum of Art in their curatorial department, and that's a Smith endowed internship actually. So that by itself is very helpful because I would say like the people who are in charge of the museum's concentration work in the museum on campus, so they know of this internship and are aware of it, and also kind of it's a really I don't know. I really appreciate that internship as an available resource, especially with everything I was just talking about, like with COVID, where it's a very competitive field and a lot of people are like vying for very small positions. So it's good to know that it's like here's something just for Smith students and often like just for museum concentrators. So that's a really helpful resource, and that was some really good experience. I would say this is gonna sound bad, but I would say it definitely like my practical experiences have guided me in a way that let me know what not to do.
Yeah.
And that has been very helpful. I would say especially this past summer, being in a job that's it also sounds like so Gen Z. Being in a job that's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I was like, this is not for me. I think the concentrations, all of them, because they all have practical experience, are so helpful with that. Going back to what I was talking about before, where it's really that stepping stone before you have to commit to something, where you can start to see where do I thrive in here and where and what do I need from a job to feel happy as well or to feel fulfilled, to feel happy. Um and then also with all these practical experiences, whether or not you go back to that museum or you go into that field, it's like you now have connections. Now you know, like starting to figure out what's good and what's not in terms of logistics and not just can I be capable to do this job, but also can this job sustain and fulfill me? Important
Yeah.
distinction. Work as a tour guide, so people will be like, "Oh, is that like a minor?" And I'm like, "No." Um, and I think that that's really important because especially when you're in college and you're in like this college bubble, especially like Smith with like our Ivy League academia, like we're very focused on the academics and like what your major is equals what you're good at or or what you're doing is your major. It's like those can't really be interchangeable, but it's the concentration is such a good like stepping stone into the job world and like into careers where it's now I guess like forcing you is like a little negative, but like it's pushing you, encouraging you and slash requiring you to get out into the job field and start to be like, well, here's what this would be like. I think it was mentioned on my tour at some point, or I had very quickly found it after because I knew I was going to be an art history major. So I think I found out about it very quickly from there. Because it was definitely one of the things that attracted me was the museum and then like the museum's concentration. Because in 17-year-old me's mind, art history degree is like this is what I want to do, this is what I'm interested in, but I couldn't like see the end point in terms of like job and career. So I like the next step for me was like, oh, museums, like that's a place that exists outside of college. Like that feels like job. I mean, it was my first year fall and it was just like, wow, this is cool. You could do that. You could do these things. Like that's cool. So I think that was just like that really sparked my interest and then that was renewed actually literally that spring with the professor who's now my advisor, Dana Leibson, did decolonize this museum. And they do that class kind of often, but it was definitely that was a really good combination of my interests. In high school, I did my high school's version. We had to all do of a TED talk on the impact of Indigenous mascots. So I was like, okay, art history, Indigenous knowledge, and then museums. And then Dana Leibson was like, I got you. There's like such many different layers of education and like miscommunication that museums have done in the past that like they can also rectify in the future, but it's like all within the museum. So that's just a really interesting history to consume and then to try and figure out solutions to. Definitely I would say Decolonize This Museum was a really cool course in terms of like the readings were interesting, learning about it was interesting, and then also I know I'm gonna carry that knowledge with me. It wasn't just like, all right, that's a cool form of art I won't ever see again. It was like, oh wow, these are like theories and practices that I can use.